If you bought like a 10-pound bag of commodity chicken at the grocery store this week, there is a very good chance you just paid about $6 for a pound and a half of pure salt water.
Which is, a pretty striking piece of retail math.
Yeah, it really is.
Because the product you think you are buying isn't necessarily the product actually sitting in your shopping cart.
Right. And I feel like that plays out in this very specific, almost universal modern experience. You are standing in the middle of the grocery store meat aisle, the fluorescent lights are humming, and you are just staring at 10 completely identical packages of chicken breasts. You're trying to make a good choice, right? Because most of us eat nearly 100 pounds of chicken every single year.
It's a huge staple in the American diet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you look at the packaging, and it screams natural. It screams farm fresh and wholesome. It really feels like you're buying a product straight from a red barn on a green hill.
Right, that classic pastoral imagery.
Yeah. But what if that packaging, like the entire aesthetic, was engineered specifically to hide the reality of how that bird was raised or how it was processed and the fact that it might be, plump full of sodium?
Well, that's exactly what we are getting into today.
Yes. Our mission in this deep dive is to decode the American supermarket meat aisle, specifically looking at the chicken industry. And we have a massive stack of sources to guide us today.
We really do.
We're pulling from investigative journalism by NPR and OPB, comprehensive policy analyses from Pew Charitable Trusts and Farm Forward, organic poultry scorecards from the Cornucopia Institute, and insider grocery breakdowns from multiple consumer advocates.
And we are going to examine the mechanics behind all of it because, this isn't just a guide on how to shop for groceries.
Right.
It is a really fascinating look at supply chain economics, regulatory loopholes, and, frankly, the psychology of marketing.
Yeah, it's wild.
By the time you next stand in that aisle, you're going to understand the precise mechanisms hiding right behind the label.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the chicken, we first have to completely strip away the marketing.
Absolutely.
Let's start with the phrase that is slapped across almost every single package in the store: all natural. When I see that, I picture a chicken pecking around in an open field foraging for bugs.
Which is exactly what they want you to picture. But the regulatory framework actually treats the agricultural process and the manufacturing process as two completely separate silos.
Wait, what do you mean by silos?
Well, by USDA definition, the term all natural solely governs what happens to the meat after harvest.
Okay.
It just dictates that the final product contains no artificial ingredients and has undergone minimal processing. It has absolutely zero bearing on animal welfare, living conditions, or antibiotic usage.
Let me make sure I'm following this. So a bird could be raised in a concentrated animal feeding operation, a AAO, right?
Correct.
Packed in a windowless shed with like 30,000 other birds. It literally never sees the sun. Its environment is completely artificially controlled to maximize feed efficiency.
Yes, that's standard practice.
But because the factory didn't inject artificial dye into the meat on the processing line, it gets a federally approved all-natural sticker.
That is the legal reality, yeah.
That is wild to me.
The term communicates a baseline manufacturing standard, right? But it is placed on the package to trigger an emotional response from you regarding agricultural purity.
It's totally an illusion.
Exactly. It provides the illusion of premium quality without the producer having to spend the actual money required to, alter the feed, lower the flock density, or provide outdoor access.
Wow. Okay, and I see no hormones added everywhere, too. Usually in big, bold green letters.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic one.
Right. It's positioned as a massive selling point, like the company is doing you this huge favor.
What is really fascinating here is the deliberate omission of historical context. Because the FDA actually banned the use of added hormones and steroids in all poultry production back in the 1950s.
Wait, the 1950s?
Yes. The practice has been strictly legal for over half a century across the entire industry.
See, I always see that label and assume it means the farm went above and beyond. But that's like a car manufacturer running a national ad campaign bragging that their new vehicle comes with a steering wheel and seatbelts.
That's a perfect analogy.
They are just taking a mandatory legal minimum and framing it as a premium upgrade for the consumer.
Companies understand consumer anxiety. Consumers want safety, right? But altering physical supply chains is incredibly expensive.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Printing no hormones on a plastic wrapper is practically free. It intercepts the consumer's anxiety and neutralizes it using a completely moot point.
Which honestly makes me completely rethink the antibiotic-free labels, too.
As it should.
Because I always bought those thinking it meant a cleaner bird from day one, like raised without any medication. Am I just paying a premium for another basic legal requirement there?
In many cases, yes, you are. The phrase antibiotic-free does not mean the bird was raised without antibiotics.
Oh, wow.
It simply refers to a federally mandated 14-day withdrawal period prior to slaughter.
So they still get antibiotics?
Yes. The mechanism there is just to ensure the drugs have cleared the bird system before processing. It is literally the legal baseline.
So what label actually means no antibiotics?
If you are looking for a bird that has never been administered antibiotics at any point in its life cycle, you have to look for the specific verified standard no antibiotics ever, or NAE.
NAE. Okay, so the labels are essentially a smokescreen. They're answering questions we aren't really asking, using legal definitions we aren't familiar with.
Exactly.
But that brings us to the physical reality of how these birds are actually grown. Because once you look past the packaging, the timeline of modern poultry production completely blew my mind.
The timeline is the entire economic engine of modern commodity poultry. Back in 1950, it took about 84 days for a chicken to reach slaughter weight.
Okay, 84 days.
Today, through decades of aggressive selective breeding and highly optimized high-protein feed, conventional chickens reach a much heavier slaughter weight in just 42 days.
42 days. They are growing twice as fast as nature intended.
Yes, and the biological toll it takes on the animal is severe.
Yeah, the sources talk about a physiological condition called woody breast.
Right.
And from what I understand, because the bird's muscle tissue is growing so rapidly, the vascular system simply cannot keep up.
Exactly.
The tissue experiences hypoxia, which is a lack of oxygen, and that leads to cell death. So the bird's body then replaces that dead tissue with rigid, fibrous connective tissue, making the meat really hard and gummy.
That is the exact biological mechanism, yes. It is a direct physiological consequence of engineering an organism purely for rapid mass.
It's so sad, honestly.
The biological support structures, the heart, the lungs, the skeleton, they're completely outpaced by the muscle growth.
Wow.
But this hyper-optimized speed doesn't stop at the farm, right? It dictates the pace of the processing facility as well. Modern plants are heavily automated, processing up to 140 birds per minute.
140 a minute. That is more than 2 birds every single second.
Yes. And when you are moving that fast, the margin for error essentially disappears. Fecal contamination becomes a widespread issue because the automated machinery occasionally ruptures the intestines during high-speed evisceration.
Oh, gross. Which leads to a step that definitely isn't printed on the all-natural label, the chemical wash.
Right. Because high-speed processing virtually guarantees SOCHA's contamination, conventional American chicken is routinely treated with antimicrobial rinses.
What kind of chemicals are we talking about?
The carcasses are sprayed or washed in chemical solutions, most commonly chlorine dioxide or peracetic acid. And that's to eliminate the bacteria that was just introduced by the machinery.
So think of it like trying to sanitize a dirty sponge by quickly dipping it in bleach. The surface might get a shock of chemicals, but the underlying structure and environment are still completely compromised.
That's a good way to visualize it.
And to put this into a global perspective, this practice is highly controversial. Like the European Union, the UK, China, and Russia all outright ban the import of American chicken specifically because of this wash.
They do.
Their regulatory bodies argue that if your processing facility requires an end-of-line chemical bath to make the meat safe, the facility itself is fundamentally unsanitary.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is purely an economic calculation. Utilizing chemical rinses is simply cheaper and faster than slowing down the processing line to ensure a sanitary harvest.
It all comes back to speed.
Exactly. And that emphasis on speed and volume continues directly into the next stage, which is the chilling process. Federal law requires carcasses to be rapidly cooled to prevent bacterial growth.
Right.
To do this, conventional American processors use water chilling, where they drop the birds into massive communal vats of ice water.
And here is where the sponge analogy becomes literal, because chicken meat naturally absorbs moisture.
It does.
When you plunge thousands of birds into a shared 50,000-gallon vat, those birds are soaking up that water, they're soaking up the antimicrobial chemicals, and they are soaking up any bacteria shared across the entire flock.
Yes, which is highly problematic.
Yeah.
Contrast that with air chilling, where birds are moved on a track through environmentally controlled chambers filled with purified cold air.
Okay.
Air chilling means no shared water, no chemical baths, and no artificial water weight added to the meat.
And that added water weight is a critical factor for the industry, because after the communal bath, many factory lines actively compound the issue.
Oh, yeah, the plumping.
Exactly. They pass the meat through an injection line where needles pump the chicken with the saltwater broth, a process the industry politely calls plumping or enhancing.
Here's where it gets really interesting for the consumer. The label will say something in tiny print like, contains up to 15% chicken broth solution.
It's kind of glossed over.
Yeah, and the sodium numbers are staggering. A natural, unplumped piece of chicken has about 50 milligrams of sodium per serving.
Right.
But if you look at Aldi's Kirkwood brand or Walmart's Great Value frozen chicken breasts, the nutrition labels show anywhere from 250 milligrams to 760 milligrams of sodium per serving.
It's a massive difference.
You aren't seasoning the chicken at home. The factory already injected it with a huge dose of salt water.
And they use hydrocolloids, specifically ingredients like carrageenan, which is a seaweed extract, to bind that salt water to the muscle fibers.
Wait, seaweed extract in chicken?
Yes. The carrageenan creates a gel matrix inside the meat. So the injected water doesn't just pool at the bottom of the plastic package. It stays trapped inside the tissue until you cook it.
Let's do the math on this because it changes the entire value proposition of grocery shopping. Say I buy a 10-pound bag of commodity chicken at $3.99 a pound.
Okay.
If 15% of the weight of that bag is trapped saltwater injection, I am paying chicken prices for water. When you factor out the 1.5 pounds of water I didn't want, the actual meat is costing me roughly $4.70 a pound.
The math doesn't lie.
The salt is cheap, the water is virtually free, and I am basically subsidizing the company's profit margin.
You also have to factor in the yield. When you take that plump chicken home and put it in a hot pan, that gel matrix breaks down.
Oh, and all the water comes out.
Exactly. The water evaporates, the meat shrinks significantly, and you are left with far less food than you originally purchased.
It's so frustrating.
That is how the commodity meat industry maintains such low sticker prices. Branding is cheaper than quality, and water is cheaper than chicken.
Well said.
Furthermore, the illusion of choice in the grocery store is often just that, an illusion. Consumer advocates have mapped the supply chain and noted that Whole Foods 365 Everyday Value Chicken is often supplied by Perdue.
Wait, really?
Yes, and Aldi's Kirkwood brand is often supplied by Tyson. You may think you're carefully choosing between competing farms, but often it is the exact same factory floor and the exact same communal water bath, just with a different sticker applied at the very end of the belt.
Which brings us to the whole regulatory blind spot. When you rely on a shared 50,000-gallon vat of ice water to cool thousands of birds an hour, that vat doesn't just absorb chemicals.
No, it doesn't.
It acts as a highly efficient distribution system for bacteria. So let's talk about the salmonella loophole.
Salmonella is a massive public health issue. It causes roughly 1.28 million illnesses a year in the U.S., and poultry is a primary vector.
Yeah.
But the regulatory framework here is incredibly counterintuitive. The USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service, the FSIS, does not consider salmonella to be an adulterant in raw poultry.
I need some clarity on that, because if a USDA inspector finds E. coli in a batch of ground beef, they classify it as an adulterant and they shut it down immediately, right?
Correct. E. coli 0157.H7 is legally classified as an adulterant, which triggers a strict zero-tolerance policy.
Right.
If it is detected, the product is illegal to sell, and the government can mandate an immediate recall. However, salmonella is classified merely as an indicator organism.
An indicator? What does that mean?
The USDA uses it to gauge if a plant's overall sanitation processes are functioning. But the mere presence of salmonella on a raw chicken breast does not legally prevent that meat from being sold to a consumer.
And the acceptable contamination levels they use as indicators are surprisingly high. Like, the USDA performance standards currently allow up to 25% of ground chicken samples and 15.4% of chicken parts to test positive for salmonella without the plant even failing the standard.
That's right.
They are legally permitted to have 1 in 4 packages of ground chicken test positive.
And even if a processing plant consistently fails those permissive standards, the USDA's enforcement powers are severely restricted due to a pivotal 2001 federal court case known as Supreme Beef.
What was the legal logic there? How could a court rule that the USDA can't enforce its own safety standards?
Well, the Supreme Beef ruling established that because salmonella is a naturally occurring bacteria in the gastrointestinal tracts of animals.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. And because it's not a foreign substance introduced by the processing facility itself, The USDA cannot use failed salmonella performance standards as the sole basis to shut down a plant. The court essentially ruled that since the meat arrives at the plant already carrying the bacteria, the plant cannot be uniquely penalized for failing to completely eradicate it.
So it's like a police officer watching someone go 100 miles an hour in a school zone. But because of a legal technicality, they aren't allowed to pull the driver over?
That's a good way to frame it.
They can only write a sternly worded letter asking them to please consider slowing down. And that is exactly what happened with the massive Foster Farms outbreaks, isn't it?
Yes. From 2012 to 2013, and continuing with another outbreak linked to 2013, the CDC and state health departments traced multi-drug-resistant strains of salmonella back to specific Foster Farms facilities.
And people got really sick.
Hundreds of people were sickened, and dozens were hospitalized. But because of the Supreme Beef precedent, the USDA lacked the authority to close the doors and order a mandatory recall.
Unbelievable.
They could only request a voluntary recall and issue notices of intended enforcement, which just requires the company to propose immediate workarounds to avoid suspension.
And while those workarounds were being negotiated, the plants just continued to operate, and the chicken continued to ship.
Exactly. This raises an important question regarding the efficacy of the testing protocols in general.
How so?
Well, not only are the enforcement mechanisms restricted, but processing plants often receive advance notice of when USDA testing will actually occur.
So they prep for it.
Yes, allowing them to temporarily adjust their chemical washes or slow their processing speeds just for the test.
That defeats the whole purpose.
Furthermore, the standard tests primarily measure the presence of salmonella, not the bacterial load, meaning they don't test how heavily contaminated the meat is.
Right.
Nor do they regularly differentiate between common strains and highly dangerous multi-drug-resistant variants.
So if the system legally permits a certain amount of risk regarding safety and it physically cuts corners by plumping meat with salt water, we really have to ask where else the industry is optimizing for cost. We need to shift our focus from the product to the economic pressures driving the corporate practices. Let's look at Costco.
Costco's $4.99 rotisserie chicken is an iconic retail item. It functions as the ultimate loss leader.
Meaning they lose money on it on purpose.
Exactly. It's a product intentionally sold below cost to drive foot traffic into the warehouse. But maintaining a fixed $4.99 price point in an inflationary economy requires immense supply chain control.
Oh, for sure.
To achieve this, Costco built its own $450 million vertically integrated poultry complex in Nebraska.
And according to an analysis of USDA inspection data published by Farm Forward, that specific facility failed the federal Salmonella Performance Standard 92% of the time since it opened.
That's a staggering figure.
For a long stretch, it maintained a 100% failure rate month after month, yet the chicken legally continued to ship.
Because of the legal loopholes we discussed.
Right. Additionally, the Costco rotisserie birds are injected with sodium phosphate and carrageenan, pushing the sodium content up to 460 milligrams per serving. But the statistic from their own corporate disclosures that stands out the most is that over 7 million of their birds die every year before even making it to the slaughter line.
Which points back directly to the biology of the 42-day growth cycle we discussed earlier.
Right, the woody breast and heart issues.
When 7 million birds succumb to cardiovascular failure, skeletal deformities, or disease before harvest, it is a clear indicator of how closely the biological limits of the animals are being pushed just to maintain that $4.99 retail price.
It's all about the margins.
And this relentless pressure for cost efficiency manifests in broader corporate behavior as well.
Right. We see this in the documented price-fixing cases. Tyson and Pilgrim's Pride, which is majority owned by the global meat conglomerate JBS, have paid hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements.
That's right.
Federal investigations and court convictions outlined how these companies basically coordinated to artificially inflate prices, manipulating the market at the expense of American consumers.
And we are also seeing this economic pressure intersect with labor practices. Investigative reporting by NPR and OPB detailed how the Department of Labor launched investigations into major producers, including Purdue and Tyson, regarding documented labor violations.
The details from the NPR and OPB reports are just heavy. They uncovered the use of migrant children, some as young as 13, working overnight shifts.
It's deeply troubling.
These minors were documented using hazardous chemicals and high-pressure hoses to sanitize industrial slaughterhouse machinery. And the Department of Labor investigation was notably sparked after a 14-year-old boy named Marcos Cux suffered a severe injury, nearly losing his arm in a conveyor belt at a Purdue facility.
It is vital to emphasize here that we are strictly relying on established public health records, federal investigations, and court documents.
Yes, we are just reporting the findings.
When you synthesize the economics of this industry from those sources, a clear pattern emerges.
Yeah.
The true cost of cheap commodity chicken does not magically disappear.
It has to go somewhere.
Exactly. It is simply transferred. It is transferred from the consumer's price tag onto the biological welfare of the animals, onto the workers operating the sanitation lines, and ultimately onto the public health system.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? When we buy commodity chicken, we are participating in an economic ecosystem that relies on price manipulation, severe biological optimization, and documented labor violations.
But the goal of this deep dive isn't to leave you feeling helpless in the grocery store.
No, definitely not. You have immense power at the checkout line if you know what to look for, and more importantly, what to ignore.
Knowledge is only valuable when it can be applied. The objective here is to equip you to navigate the meat aisle effectively, recognizing that you can actually opt out of the commodity system.
Exactly. Let's build the learner's guide to the meat counter. First, here is what you want to avoid. Skip the generic commodity store brands where the sourcing and processing methods are completely opaque.
Good rule of thumb.
Turn the package around and immediately check the nutrition label. If an unseasoned raw chicken breast lists over 100 milligrams of sodium per serving, just put it back on the shelf. You are looking at a product that has been injected with a saltwater and carrageenan solution.
Next, scan the packaging for the specific term air-chilled. This is a crucial differentiator.
The air-chilled label is huge.
It confirms the bird was not submerged in a communal water bath. It means the meat hasn't absorbed shared antimicrobial chemicals, it hasn't been exposed to the communal bacterial load, and you are not paying for retained water weight.
What about the antibiotic labels?
Regarding antibiotics, ignore the vague, natural, or antibiotic-free marketing. Look explicitly for the No Antibiotics Ever, or NAE designation, ideally verified by a third-party certifier.
And if you want the absolute gold standard, you can consult independent scorecards, like the one published by the Cornucopia Institute.
They do great work.
They point consumers toward true pasture-raised birds. And this is fundamentally different from free range, which legally might only require a tiny little door leading to a concrete patio.
Right. Free range can be very misleading.
Pasture-raised means the birds actually live outdoors, foraging in grass. Look for rigorous third-party certifications stamped right on the label, such as Animal Welfare Approved, Certified Humane, or Global Animal Partnership Step 2 or higher.
It is important to acknowledge that those premium pasture-raised options are not universally available everywhere, and they do carry a higher price point.
That's fair.
However, there are meaningful, accessible step-ups available at conventional grocery stores right now. Brands like Aldi's Never Any line, Publix's Greenwise, which features air-chilled options, and Kroger's Simple Truth line.
Those are great alternatives.
These represent significant structural upgrades from their conventional private label counterparts sitting just a few feet away in the exact same cooler.
And here's where it gets really interesting. You don't have to quit eating chicken. Upgrading your choice is often just a matter of walking 10 feet down the aisle, moving from the 760 milligram saltwater injected chicken to the actual air-chilled option.
It's a small physical shift for a huge quality shift.
Yes. The sticker price is a few dollars more per pound, but mathematically you are paying for nutrient-dense meat, not water that will just evaporate in your skillet.
The math inherently shifts when you account for the yield. And from both a health and an economic standpoint, purchasing one high-quality air-chilled or pasture-raised chicken a week provides far more tangible value than consuming heavily processed, saltwater-injected commodity chicken every single day.
Quality over quantity.
Exactly. With every purchase, you are actively choosing which supply chain you want to capitalize.
Let's bring it all together. We started by stripping away the deceptive marketing labels, revealing how legal minimums are packaged as premium features.
The no hormones trick.
Right. We explored the biological reality of the 42-day growth cycle and how high-speed processing necessitates chemical washes and communal ice baths.
The chlorine in the water chilling.
We calculated the hidden costs of saltwater plumping, broke down how the Supreme Beef case restricts the USDA from treating salmonella as an adulterant, and looked at the sobering labor and economic realities behind the $4.99 rotisserie chicken.
It's a lot of ground covered.
It is, but we also armed you with the exact label-reading metrics you need to confidently bypass the commodity system and find a genuinely better product.
And as we conclude today, I really want to leave you with a thought that connects this specific deep dive to the broader landscape of your daily life.
Okay, what is it?
If the American poultry industry has become so hyper-optimized for speed, volume, and cost that other developed nations outright ban our chicken from crossing their borders.
Yeah, that still blows my mind.
Right. It raises a critical question. Are we, as American consumers, the outliers in global food safety? And if the golden rule in the meat aisle is that branding is cheaper than quality, how many other aisles in your local grocery store are executing the exact same playbook?
Wow. It makes you look at that entire fluorescent lit store a little differently, doesn't it?
It really should.
The next time you find yourself standing in front of those identical packages, you aren't just guessing anymore. You know the mechanisms, you know the math, and you know exactly how to make the right choice. Thanks for taking the time to dive into the sources with us today.